Good morning. It's Lydia Naboo from Stockton, Missouri. Today, I want to talk about the fact that we need to expose some gender lies. I'm sure most everybody out there saw the news this week and talking about the incident in Nashville where a mass shooting occurred. We had a number of children and adults killed there. And that was in a Christian school. And the person who was doing the shooting was a transgender identifying individual with a manifesto, a map, and multiple firearms. That individual is now dead, but I refuse to use the shooter's name because I will not add to their notoriety. This individual attended that same school when she was younger and apparently carried a grudge, probably about the truth of the Bible taught in Christian schools, if I had to hazard a guess on any of that. This idiocy of transgenderism and our failure to stand up against it, in my view, may be reality's last stand. Um, it, it's an undeniable fact. Um, if our undeniable facts can be denied en masse, then we become hostage to chaos. And we simply cannot afford to lose our collective tether on reality. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not obsessed with gender. I'm obsessed with the preservation of a functional society. Ours will fail if we allow some to impose their personal fictions on others. Transgenderism has exploded across the world in the past decade, particularly in the West. The Williams Institute at the UCLA Law School reports that the number of young people identifying as transgender has doubled in just the last few years, and that 1 out of 5 people who identify as transgender are 13 to 17 years of age, with more than 42,000 receiving the diagnosis in 2021. On the popular school media platform, social media platform, TikTok, the hashtag trans has logged 50.2 billion views. That's billion with a B, as of today, and having nearly doubled within the last year. Many people are disturbed by this, but few are as disturbed as they ought to be. What we face is an unprecedented coupling of postmodernistic academic theory with an internet fueled social contagion targeting vulnerable boys and girls who are struggling with their God given sex. This has given birth to what we call transgender ideology or gender ideology, which in turn is fueling a medical and social scandal that ambushes our very understanding of reality itself. This is not a right versus left issue. The vast majority of Americans, Republicans, independents, and nearly a majority of Democrats as well, think that the transgender movement has gone too far by encouraging minors to transition through drugs and surgery, according to the October 2022 Summit Ministries and McLaughlin and Associates poll. In a Fox News interview, a transsexual activist, Buck Angel, agreed with these results, saying that things are accelerating in a way that seems too fast. Even the transgenders are worried, okay? In reference to the social media contagion that seems to be the transgender movement's primary accelerant, the British lesbian activist Kate Harris said, "Our major concern is that millions of impressionable children are watching these online influencers. It's no coincidence that the growth of TikTok coincides exactly with the exponential growth of children presenting with gender dysphoria." Even the gay neuroscientist Simon LeVay, whose research led to the claim that homosexuality is genetically inheritable, has expressed skepticism about the transgender movement. An article in a leading LGBTQ publication quotes LeVay as saying, "We may be overly supportive of gender nonconforming kids, thinking they may be transgender, so advocating giving them hormones or castrating them at an early age." We should always love our children as they are, but don't tell them their sexuality is a done deal before they reach puberty. Critics of transgender ideology are predictably met with withering rebuke. They're labeled as transphobic, hateful, and even criminal. This vitriol seems especially intense when the criticism arises from within the LGBTQ community. One activist called LeVay's remarks quoted above as beyond irresponsible, implying that such comments foster bullying and aggression. Tweets from singer Bette Midler and author J.K. Rowling expressing concern about the diminishment of womanhood were roundly condemned in forceful and often vulgar ways, even though both women have been longtime supporters of the LGBTQ movement. Yet what commentators debate about, the breakdown of women's sports, the eccentric demand that each of us select our own pronouns or else, the unexpected influence of the TikTok social media platform, and the foisting of drag queen fetishism on unsuspecting children, these are but symptoms of a deeper problem that no amount of editorializing, whether scornful or admiring, can dismiss. To borrow an oft repeated line from King Solomon, in Ecclesiastes 1:9, it says, "There is nothing new under the sun." Gender confusion is not new. What is new in human history, however, is the unprecedented boosterism of this confusion through a perfect storm of culture-making institutions clamoring for attention, government bureaucrats opportunistically expanding their power, and a medical industrial complex soullessly yearning for financial enrichment. As we'll see here, long before the public began noticing that something odd was going on in popular culture, discussions of gender ideology, the battle for the high ground, had long been won. Churches that adhere to the historic Orthodox biblical worldview are among the few places where any dissent can be found. My concern is mainly about the impact of gender ideology on children, teenagers, and young adults, because gender ideology is being taught in our schools, and because of the ideological capture of the medical system, countless troubled young people have been brainwashed into a youth onset delirium in which the denial of objective reality is seen as a commendable social good. The medical element of all of this gender ideology is that, unlike other treatment modalities for issues such as addiction, medical professionals handling transgender treatment are told to encourage the patient's delusions, and if the patient is a minor, demand that the parents do so as well, or else. The natural flavor of this highly choreographed treatment plan is the intentional infliction of disease through the off-label experimental use of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. Eugenic sterilization is not a side effect, it is a predictable outcome if treatment is carried out to its prescribed end. Many of these patients are now realizing that the horrendous disease that they have experienced because of this experimental treatment have permanently damaged their bodies without healing their souls. A growing number of them are finding their bodies irreversibly disfigured due to radically invasive and medically unnecessary surgeries. When faced with legal liabilities, doctors, hospitals, and pharmaceutical companies hide behind standards of care crafted by a handful of activists inside the various medical associations, bereft of the kind of evidence we would expect to ground modern medical treatment. Impossibly short statutes of limitations practically guarantee that doctors are far removed from liability by the time serious symptoms present themselves, which is often a decade after treatment. The spiritual element of gender ideology is there is a debate. The debate over gender ideology has revealed a raging fury against the idea that human beings bear the image of God. Nowhere in this indignation more clearly seen than the deconstruction of the very definition of male and female. Sincere and faithful Christians cannot remain on the sidelines. We must speak with biblically informed and compassionate wisdom. The philosophical and moral questions are complex, but what is at stake is whether we, as a human society, will be able to recognize truth, discern reality, and prepare the rising generation to live confidently as image bearers of God. Two reasons why we should be concerned is that um, you wonder whether or not this level of concern is warranted. But my position is twofold. First, I think the concern is warranted because the issue of gender ideology is much bigger than the few people who are genuinely experiencing a severe incongruous over their biological sex. Second, I think the concern is warranted because the struggle over gender ideology is a gospel issue that has serious medical and psychological ramifications. The book of Genesis says that God made us male and female. Jesus confirmed this teaching. Biologically, it is undeniably true. If society persists in denying the importance of this fundamental aspect of being, we could very well be held hostage to this chaos and lose our collective tether on reality. To echo the words of the evolutionary biologist Colin Wright, he quoted at the beginning, if you had asked people 30 years ago if they had ever met a person who sincerely claimed to be the opposite sex, few could tell you that they had. Maybe they would mention seeing what were once called transvestites at Mardi Gras, or a few troubled individuals who lived in the margins of society. I've known transvestites in my life. I've known gay people. I've known lesbians. I have not had an issue with any of this, but going around and you know, torturing our children in the long run with this sex change operations, the puberty blockers, and the hormones is really disheartening to me, and it just goes against everything I was raised to believe. But according to reputable polling, gender identity issues are now at the forefront of concern for young adults. Some polling says that 39% of young people claim to identify as LGBTQ. In addition to youth identifying as transgender, some now say that they are non binary or genderqueer, or another of an ever increasing list of self created gender labels. Healthline.com, which you would think would be a reputable place to go, lists and defines 68 terms that describe gender identity and expression. Some have estimated that given the current yet ever-changing parameters of gender ideology, there could well be over 3,000 different genders if children are taken for therapy or medical evaluation. Current standards of care specify that those identifying as other than their biological sex be treated by therapists as if they are, in fact, something other than their biological sex. Families are being told that if they do not embrace this treatment regimen, they are putting their child at risk of suicide and perhaps risking the forfeiture of their parental rights. You brought that child into the world. You were given a boy or a girl. That was God's choice. And allowing this medical treatment is doing a disservice to your child and to God. Families are distraught and confused by this, entire situation. And Americans as a whole, according to the polling by Summit Ministries, seem baffled by the whole issue. 2/3 of Americans say they do not think that transgender identity is a normal, healthy lifestyle. 72% say that it should be taught in schools. 90% say that gender alteration drugs and surgery should not be performed on minors. Yet for the gender ideologies and the moneyed players who set this top-down systematic deconstruction of sex in motion, the instinctual clarity most people have about the issue is misguided. The confusion that gender ideology creates is a feature, not a bug, of their entire project. If none of this makes reasonable sense to you, well, that is precisely the point. At the root, we are dealing with a postmodern rejection of reality that is bound to fail. The question is, how many lives must be shattered by it before it does? And the truth must be proclaimed and defended. Transgenderism is a medical and social scandal. This ideology twists language and distorts reality. This is not a left versus right issue, nor is it a science versus religion issue. The biologist quoted earlier is an atheist, but the truth is true, no matter who says it. If an atheist can summon the courage to speak with clarity against the tide of lies surrounding gender ideology, how much more then should those who follow the teachings of Jesus speak boldly? The Bible says that Jesus is the one who came to bear witness to the truth. John 18:37. The word for truth in New Testament Greek means reality. Can we not be confident that in Jesus there is an antidote to what ails us? That his vision for human flourishing is worth pursuing? Do we not have a better, truer story to proclaim? Stephen Richards, a detransitioner, said, "No clinical description of my transition, and especially my castration, can really capture how it feels. They gouged into my soul. They warped and molded me into something demonic, into someone else's sick fetish. I was only 14. Now I have to live with it forever." He is trying to detransition from what was done to him when he was 14 years old. He is one of a rising number of people who are known as detransitioners, men and women who underwent experimental gender medicalization, including hormones and surgery or both, and now deeply regret it. Stephen realizes that he believed a lie about the human body, that it is physically possible to transition to the opposite sex, and now must live forever with irreversible physical and emotional scars. What led to Stephen's tragic experience is nothing less than a shocking medical scandal. That scandal, excuse me, was caused by the breakdown of medical ethics and an insatiable thirst for profits without regard to the social cost. No doubt what I have to say will anger you, and it should. Under the guise of helping people navigate gender confusion, many vulnerable people across the West, even children, are being scarred for life. The lie of born in the wrong body and transitioning sexes. That's all it is. It's a lie. For all human history, the reality of maleness and femaleness has been apparent until now. Humans are mammals. Mammals are dimorphic. They are either male or female. The science is beyond question. It is not just a matter of what kind of genitals we have. Nearly every cell of our bodies is male or female. Scientists have cataloged 6,500 such differences. Obviously, in the male spectrum, males may be more or less masculine, judging by cultural stereotypes. Females may be less feminine, again, judging what by cultural stereotypes. Sometimes these stereotypes make people feel as if they do not fit in in with the others of their sex. Young women who enjoy outdoor activities and competitive sports, who have in the past been called tomboys, may question their femininity because of the stereotypes they see in popular culture that are not um, ones with which they identify. Similarly, young men who are emotionally sensitive may find that they do not enjoy roughhousing as other boys their age do. With enough social pressure, the natural identity confusion through which these young men and women pass in adolescence can lead them to even question their maleness or femaleness. Many are now coming to believe that there are not two spectra, one male and the other female, but one spectrum with strong femininity on one end and strong masculinity on the other. This is not a medical fact, but an opinion based on writings from the fringes of social psychology, in which the word gender, which comes from the root genus, from which we get our word genetics, is misappropriated to create an artificial distinction between sex and gender, with sex referring to a person's biology and gender referring to their socially constructed self identification. Thus, it's theorized a person could be biologically male in sex but female in gender, or vice versa. The availability of synthetic hormones has made this a medical issue, with doctors across the country eager to perform risky experimental treatments designed to align a patient's biology with their preferred sexual identity. Ironically, all of this, what began as a movement, to help people who do not identify with culturally derived masculine and feminine stereotypes, end up enshrining and even medicalizing those stereotypes with disturbing consequences. Faithful Christians are going to have to exhibit a lot of patience in the coming years dealing with the fallout of the gender identity medical scandal. Of course, God can and does bring healing, and sometimes quickly and suddenly. But as the number of detransitioners grow and more people realize that their decision led them to permanently damage their bodies, compassionate followers of Jesus must be prepared to walk alongside them. The practice of medicine has produced profound benefits for billions. Yet the idea that a medical technique that is possible is therefore ethical has led to widespread heartache. Francis Galton was one of the most respected scientists of his day, yet his racist viewpoint led to the science of eugenics, which was practiced in the United States to forcefully um, sterilized 60,000 women. Antonio Egas Manes won a Nobel Prize for inventing the lobotomy and promoting it as a remarkable cure for mental illness like schizophrenia. 50,000 people received that procedure. Many died of it as a result, and others had their lives ruined. The science seemed settled in both cases, but we now see them as colossal horrors. When the history is written, will gender affirming care for people with gender identity disorder, gender dysphoria, also be seen as a medical scandal? I believe it will. But there is a difference between sterilization and lobotomization. Did not include built-in popular cultural campaigns to get people to choose those procedures for themselves. This will take time to unwind. As more of the transitioners like Stephen Richard come forward and detail the catastrophic and irreparable harm that was done to them, it will become impossible to ignore the carnage. Christians must not shrink back from the task of confronting generational indoctrination that has occurred via the school system and throughout culture, that has most tragically left many struggling, confused, disfigured, and sterilized. Whenever you take your children in and some doctor tells you that if you do not recognize that your little girl wants to be a boy or your boy wants to be a girl and you don't do it, they say you're harming your child. I don't think you're harming your child by trying to point them to the truth in their life. So when they start treating your child with this gender dysphoria, they often start when they're very young, 6, 7, 8 years old. You see a lot of it in the news where parents are fighting over whether or not to allow a child to transition to the opposite sex. But we have to understand what we're doing to our kids. One of the hormone blockers routinely used to pause puberty is Lupron, also known as Leuprolide. Like triptorelin, the blocker that was used in the 1998 Dutch case report. It blocks the release of LH-FSH, which stops testosterone from being produced, and released from the testes, or estrogen from the ovaries. It's approved for use. Lupron is for treating prostate cancer in men and endometriosis in women. It has also been used to chemically castrate sex offenders. To date, there's never been any formal FDA stamp of approval for puberty blockers to be used to treat gender dysphoria in children. In 2022, the FDA issued a warning to be added to Lupron, noting that brain swelling and vision loss were among the drug's side effects. Another long-term side effect of hormone blockers is bone density loss. When blockers are administered to a pubertal age child, the bones do not form as they should. The calcium deposits do not happen as they normally would, and normal physiological development is hindered. In the United Kingdom, a cohort of 44 12 to 15-year-old children were put on blockers at the London-based Tavistock Gender Clinic, which as of right now, they were ordered to close in 2023. They were tracked for 9 years. According to their findings published in the academic journal PLOS One, when the children completed chemical puberty blockage at age 16, the researchers found reduced growth in both height and bone strength. Of the 44 who were given the hormone suppressants, 43 went on to take cross-sex hormones. Why is this scandalous? At the very root of the current American treatment protocol for gender dysphoria is the lie that gender dysphoria is an endocrine condition with manifested physical symptoms. It is not. There is no medical test, such as a blood test or a brain scan, that confirm a diagnosis. Rather, gender dysphoria is a mental health condition with an official definition in the DSM-5, the manual detailing the diagnostic criteria for mental health conditions. Gender dysphoria only becomes an endocrine condition when the introduction of hormones that would not ordinarily be present are put in the body. The introduction of foreign hormones can induce the endocrine disease state of hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, which shuts down the production of sex hormones in the testes of male and ovaries of females, resulting in what amounts to chemical sterilization. Since doctors are the ones who induce the condition, it is called iatrogenic, which refers to an illness that is caused by medical examination or treatment. I'm of the view that doctors should not be in the business of causing disease. Moreover, the human endocrine system is a delicate ecosystem, and hormone levels are based on one's biological sex. If someone was suffering mentally and the root of the problem was a thyroid issue causing hormonal dysregulation, a patient would likely visit an endocrinologist to address the problem, and the goal would be to balance their hormone levels. Hormone levels are a function of biological sex. When high doses of the wrong sex hormones are introduced into the human endocrine system, serious problems result. Hormone treatment, even when properly administered, is risky. According to the Mayo Clinic, the long-term risks of hormone use include infertility, deep vein thrombosis, pulmonary embolisms, high triglycerides, a type of fat in one's blood, weight gain, high potassium, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, excessive prolactin in one's blood, nipple discharge, and strokes. What happens when doctors prescribe such hormones to adolescents to produce cross-sex hormonal states? We're just now beginning to find out. And by the time the truth comes out, long-term damage may be irreversible. As previously noted, when children are put on hormone blockers, it is likely they will receive pediatric Lupron. Investigative journalist Jennifer Bilek noted in a speech in July of 2022 at Hillsdale College Kirby Center in Washington, D.C., that the adult version of Lupron is quite lucrative. It costs $4,800 to treat endometriosis in women for a 3-month dose. According to a 2018 investigative report, the pediatric version is even more lucrative, $9,700 for the same dose. A subcutaneous implant to deliver this drug to children is $35,000. A simple implant for adult men battling prostate cancer costs $4,400. Using these numbers, if just 100 children out of the 42,000 US children diagnosed last year with gender dysphoria took these drugs for 7 years, it would amount to $27 million in drug sales. And that's only for the blockers. Cross sex hormones are another moneymaker for the medical industry. And those who begin this experimental medicalization will be on it for as long as they wish the condition to persist, quite possibly for life. Think about it. By encouraging puberty blockers and cross sex hormones, Big Pharma and Big Medicine could foster long term and extremely bankable dependence on their products. With regard to body disfiguring surgeries, according to Global Market Insights, the national profit for these kinds of operations was $623 million in 2022, having doubled in just 3 years. By 2032, excuse me, the value projection for this industry is listed at $1.9 billion. We see this as a predatory industry that represents crony capitalism at its worst. And remember that if a child can be medicalized in this way, he or she will be a patient for life. These brutal surgeries often require extensive follow up care, which of course means additional fat profits for these industries. The coming challenge for the church, as I see it, is twofold: equipping the next generation with the truth and philosophical tools to courageously engage this progressive and pervasive ideology, and ministering to the wave of those medically harmed young people and their families whose lives have been shattered. And shattered is not too strong a word to describe what happens when people try to invert reality and end up being worse off than they were before. Abigail Schreier, author of Irreversible Damage: The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters, wrote about her experience engaging moms and dads who have dealt with adolescent and teenage girls self identifying as trans. Any of these parents would gladly pay $100 a gallon for unleaded gasoline to get their daughters to safety. A mom whose teen daughter is suddenly clamoring for top surgery would take her chances with COVID in a heartbeat. She'd sign up for an unmasked tour of the Wuhan Institute of Virology if she could only shield her children from the people who'd prefer to push gender ideology than do their actual jobs, much less respect the curtilage of a family. Faithful Christians are going to have to exhibit a lot of patience in the coming years in dealing with the fallout of the gender identity medical issue scandal. Of course, God can and does bring healing, and sometimes quickly and suddenly, but as the number of detransitioners grows and more people realize that their decisions led them to permanently damage their bodies, compassionate followers of Jesus must be prepared to walk alongside. The practice of medicine has produced profound benefits for millions, billions even. Yet the idea that a medical technique that is possible and therefore ethical has led to widespread heartache. Um, you know, we've got to understand what's going on. We've got people that fall for this lie and cater to young children and go and get them medically castrated and put on the puberty blockers and destroy their bone structure, destroy their endocrinology, cause all kinds of medical heartache for the different parents. There's no reason for that. Why would you want to harm your child on purpose, when all it would take is for you to love your child no matter what, if they're a tomboy or they're a boy that likes to cook, there's nothing wrong with that. Let the girls go out and play football. I did. Let the boys cook in the kitchen. I did. My brother was the first boy who ever took home economics in high school in Kansas City, where we attended. And, he learned to sew and he learned to cook and everything. And, they nobody had an issue with it, and nobody ever thought that he was a girl. He took a class just to graduate, you know, and but it has helped him through the years. If your daughter wants to become an auto mechanic, that doesn't mean that she wants to be a boy. You know, embrace your children and give them, oh, excuse me, and give them the love and attention that they require, and allow them to get to an age where they have developed their brains, developed their bodies, and if they want to do something after they're 24, 25, then that's a different story. But stop all this idiocy of trying to change the sex of your child that's 6, 7, 8 years old. They don't know what's going on in the world, and they don't understand how they are being manipulated by social media and, this week, news broadcasters who unfortunately said that there was a woman or a girl who had gone into that Christian school and murdered all those children and all those adults. But then they came back and were falling all over themselves to make sure that they used her preferred pronoun of he. She was not a he. She was confused, and somebody should have taken her by the hand all of these years and helped her deal with this ideology. You know, gays and lesbians have been in our life forever, and but they were not ones who came out and beat you over the head and said if you didn't agree with them that you were hateful, or you were some kind of a demonic person for not identifying with them. But back in the 70s and 80s, if you were gay or gay or lesbian, you didn't beat people over the head with it. People may have known you were dating a girl or a boy that, and when you were a boy, but you didn't go and push it in their face. And this transgenderism and this 68 different sexes and so forth, that's a lie. Get away from these lies. Understand that God made male and female, and we need to start addressing that and making our children understand that that's the way of the world. And get away from these ideologies that tell you you're a bad parent if you don't get hormone blockers for your children. Take some care for them, because you don't want them, after you're gone, still having medical issues from what you did when they were a child. Let's get back away from that. Let's get back to biblical understanding, and let's get out of all of this hatred that's going around our world. It's ridiculous. It's confusing. And if we cannot accept reality, then we've got a lost cause going on in our world today. Reality is not something you can change. And so, calling your preferred pronoun a he or a she or an it, or if you're trying to be a furry even, that's not reality. Let's get back to reality in our world. It's the only thing that's going to save us at this particular point in time. So I thank you for joining me today. If you have something you'd like to comment, go to our Facebook page and do so, or you can email me at pastorlb@axmediagroup.com. If you'd like to donate to our show or sponsor any of our programming, you can go to axmediagroup.com and press the donate button. It gives you the option of saying where you want your money to go even. But we thank you for joining us, and I hope you can join me in praying for our children, praying for our nation, and praying for reality to come back into our world, because we've lost it at this point. Thank you.